In one of the most daring and courageous sea battles of the war, the British destroyer H.M.S. Glowworm of 1,345 tons fought a single-handed duel at point-blank range with the 10,000-ton German cruiser Admiral Hipper. Then, battered and burning, she turned in a last superb gesture of defiance and rammed the giant enemy towering above her. On July 10, 1945, Lieutenant Commander Gerard Broadmead Roope, RN, the Glowworm's heroic commander, was posthumously awarded the very first Victoria Cross of World War II. This award was based on the testimony of the one surviving officer, 27-year-old Lieutenant Robert Ramsay, RN, and a communication sent personally by the captain of the Hipper, Hellmuth Heye, via the Red Cross to the British Admiralty, commending Roope for his bravery in action. On April 5, 1940, Glowworm was part of the escort of the battlecruiser Renown, along with her sisters Greyhound, Hero and Hyperion. The ships covered the mine-laying operation in Norwegian waters. On April 7th, Glowworm was detached from the task force to search for a man lost overboard. In her efforts to find him, the destroyer lost touch with the main British force, and as the weather worsened, she had to reduce speed to less than 10 knots. Her gyro compass failed, and she had to steer by magnetic compass. At daybreak on April 8th, she was trying to rendezvous with another British force when she sighted an unidentified destroyer. "We immediately challenged her," said Ramsay, "and she replied that she was Swedish. Then she opened fire." A few moments later, another destroyer was sighted, and the Glowworm began her gallant fight, against odds from the start. She had encountered the German destroyers Z-11 Bernd von Arnim and Z-18 Hans Ludemann in heavy fog. The destroyers were part of a German naval detachment led by the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper on its way to land troops at Trondheim as part of the German invasion of Norway. The battle became a slamming match, with the destroyers maneuvering at full speed and firing all guns. Glowworm forced the German destroyers to attempt to disengage and signal for help. Admiral Hipper soon answered the request, spotting Glowworm at 9:50 a.m. Hipper initially had difficulty distinguishing Glowworm from the other ships, but opened fire 8 minutes later at 8,400 meters, 9,200 yards, with her 20.3 centimeter, 8-inch main guns. "Very soon our director control tower was flooded out by heavy seas," continued Ramsay. "The ship was being thrown about and rolling very heavily. We lost 2 men overboard, and the roll of the ship injured several, but we scored a hit on the leading enemy destroyer. They didn't hit us. Shortly afterwards, they broke off the action and were trying to lead us on to something more powerful." Although the Glowworm's commanding officer, Gerard Roope, RN, knew what the enemy was trying to do, he decided to find out what big ships the Germans had at sea. He hoped to shadow them and report their movements. The Hipper was armed with 8 8-inch, 12 4.1-inch, and 12 37mm guns against the destroyer's 4 4.7-inch guns. Weather conditions made shadowing impossible, and from then on, the Glowworm knew her fate was sealed. At this point, the sole purpose of Lieutenant Commander Roope was to inflict as much damage as possible on the enemy before being sunk, and the heroic battle began. Long before the Glowworm's guns were within range, the Hipper poured 8-inch shells at the destroyer and hit her mercilessly. "We made smoke," said Lieutenant Ramsay, and began to close the enemy cruiser. At 10:10 a.m., the Glowworm fired her torpedoes. Hipper's captain, realizing the possibility of a torpedo attack, ensured his ship's bow was pointed at Glowworm to avoid being struck. Meanwhile, the Glowworm was rapidly becoming a blazing inferno. One of her 4 guns was out of action, and her rangefinder was hit. The upper yard of her mast collapsed across the siren wires, and her sirens screeched unheeded in the blaze of battle and stink of cordite and black smoke. Then Lieutenant Commander Roope decided to ram the Hipper. Going in under a storm of fire from the Hipper's guns, he steered for the enemy's starboard side. There was a grinding crunch as the destroyer's bows crumpled against the cruiser's armored plating. Men fell to the deck in a welter of blood and seawater, fire and smoke. Those who could picked themselves up again. As we drew away, we opened fire once more, Lieutenant Ramsay said. We scored one hit at 400 yards. Our bows were badly stoved in. A shell had passed through the wheelhouse. Another had burst into the transmitting station, killing most of the crew and all the staff of the wireless office. A third entered the ship under the after torpedo tubes, crossed the ship and burst against the forward bulkhead of the captain's cabin. The cabin was being used as a first aid station, and the explosion turned it into a shamble. This shell also made a huge hole in the ship's side abreast the engine room, and another completely wrecked the after superstructure. The captain was so far unhurt, and as the ship heeled over to starboard, he gave the order to abandon ship. He sent me down from the bridge, and I tried to get as much timber and other floating material over the side as possible. There seemed to be very few unwounded, but all that could be done was done to put life belts on the injured men in the hope that they would float. The captain, the only survivor on the bridge besides Ramsay, then went down to the boiler room and let off steam to avoid an explosion as the ship sank. However, her boilers exploded at 10:24 a.m., taking 109 of her crew with her. She initially capsized, but after floating bottom up for a few moments, she sank. Admiral Hipper moved in to rescue her man overboard and Glowworm's survivors. The German sailor was not found, but 40 British sailors were recovered, although at least 6 later died of their wounds. The captain was not among them, though he was seen in the water. Lieutenant Ramsay was taken before the Hipper's Captain Heye, who told him the torpedoes had missed his ship by only a few yards. The German accounts only mention 4 torpedoes fired by Glowworm, but British accounts say all 10 were fired. This was confirmed by photographic evidence taken after the collision showing all of her torpedo tubes empty. Heye then informed Ramsay that the ramming had damaged one set of her torpedo tubes, flooded 2 compartments, and put her freshwater system out of action. The rescued crew was taken to Trondheim, and afterwards Hipper had to return to Germany to be docked for repairs. Lieutenant Ramsay was awarded a Distinguished Service Order, while Captain Heye received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross on January 18, 1941. In 1942, he was promoted to Vice Admiral, and from September to November 1942, he was Commanding Admiral of the German Naval Forces in the Black Sea. From April 1944 onward, he was Commanding Admiral of the Small Maritime Combat Forces and survived the war, becoming influential in post-war West Germany before dying in 1970. We hope you enjoyed this account based upon the testimony of Lieutenant Ramsay, the sole surviving officer of H.M.S. Glowworm. This show was made to explain more fully the circumstances of the Glowworm's engagement, which was recently produced as a short. If you aren't a subscriber, please like and subscribe today for more short or full video shows.